Welcome to Shaking Up the Weeds with Upwise Capital. We're high from New York, a Ganjapreneur podcast. Thank you, Owl P. Chino, for that amazing introduction. Always good, as always, right?
Yes.
And we're back.
We're back, baby. It's nice to be back.
Yep, first show of 2024.
Shaking up the weeds in 2024.
Yeah.
We have an amazing guest.
Yes, we do. This is Eric, who's the managing partner of AlphaRoot. Welcome, Eric.
Thank
you
you.
for coming.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
First one of the year. I'm honored.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Happy New Year, man.
Happy New Year.
We knew it was coming. It's a special event, and we're glad you're here. And you came all the way from Chelsea. Right?
Chelsea, just a little cross town.
Far commute.
Easy.
And we're here, of course, up 59th and 2nd Avenue with our offices. And you're gonna start off and tell us a little bit of your super hero origin story, how you got into the cannabis business, what happened to make you go in this crazy.
Yeah, no, it's been an awesome journey. Thanks again for having me. So one of the co-founders of AlphaRoot, we're a full service commercial insurance brokerage that focuses exclusively in the cannabis space. And it kind of like happened organically, honestly. My partner and I, we were working at another brokerage called Founder Shield that focused on a lot of emerging industries and emerging technologies. And we built up that organization. So we were working with like businesses like gig economy, a lot of SaaS companies, other emerging technologies. And then we started to see cannabis risks started to come across our desk. And obviously, as you guys know, it's like super specialized, highly regulated, very complex, from the regulations all the way to like the business, like structure, everything about it. And what we said was, if we want to have success and we really want to build industry expertise, we need to dive into it with full force, right? 2 feet in. Because before that, we were kind of doing like half in, half out, working with Founder Shield and AlphaRoot. And we saw the growth of the industry really starting to take off, in 2018. So we started to exclusively focus in the space in 2019. And it's been great ever since, honestly. We work with a lot of early stage businesses that are just getting off the ground, work with some of the larger multi-state operators in the space too, and really, everything in between. And focusing on, it's not always the sexiest and funnest part of the business, but I think the one thing that's kind of cool about it is, when you think about an industry that's going from, illicit to legal, right?
Yeah.
Things like insurance and, debt providing, right? With what you guys are doing at Upwise Capital, right? Like you can't do that with the previous market, right? So it continues to show, and I think it aids the legitimacy of it. And, people are excited about it. You see more and more folks like us trying to pour into the space on a daily basis, right? And
it's super important. Like I was at a New Year's Eve party. I was telling people about cannabis, what's happening in New York. And one of the first questions people ask is, what about insurance? What do people do?
Yeah.
And you're absolutely correct. It is like you've got any kind of emerging business.
It's crazy because in cannabis, you really should be insuring most of the stuff in your store, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the biggest thing that I think retailers miss, is product liability insurance as well. Because, and even manufacturers who are making the products, right?
Yeah.
Like if you put the wrong dosage accidentally in some sort of product, and somebody eats that, by mistake, you're fucked if you don't have the right insurance policy.
What's interesting is that the cannabis space, because of how regulated it is, like carriers are starting to see all the stringent requirements that operators have to go through. So it's actually easier for us to work with a cannabis business that's licensed, operating legally, everything's tracked from seed to sale, versus like CBD in the hemp market is much less regulated. But you would think, like getting insurance for a cannabis business is more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually not.
Really?
Yeah, because think about it, like all the stringent requirements.
Hemp is tough for us to fight.
Yeah.
It's just a bad industry.
It's tough.
What's like the craziest insurance you say you ever wrote for a customer?
What's fun, I was thinking about this question, is like, because if you are a more traditional insurance broker that works in things like commercial real estate, and when we have, so one thing that I just wanted to mention is we're part of a much larger organization now. We were acquired in 2021 by Baldwin Risk Partners, which is a more traditional brokerage, works in a lot of commercial real estate, life science. And the reason I bring that up is because one of the cool things of being a part of the BRP ecosystem is, producers in different areas of the business, inevitably one of their immediate connections that they have has someone related to the cannabis space, right? And so they say, hey, can you help my buddy out get insurance for this manufacturing operation cultivation? And they were like, I don't know what the hell to do with this, right? Because part of like our area of expertise is when we see a risk and we understand the nuances of it, we know exactly what insurance carriers to go to, who's going to write the risk, depending on the size and scope of operations. But a more traditional broker, they don't even know where to go. They may not have access to the carriers that write in the cannabis space. So they come to us and they say, hey, can you help us out? So that's why I thought it was funny, is because probably to them, when you ask them what's the craziest account, they probably say a cannabis business. So when I was looking at it, I was like, it's kind of tough. I think one of the craziest things, and this kind of goes back to, the structure of a lot of these companies is, we were just talking about it before, just the different operations that you kind of have in the works and the different entities per location. And you look at a lot of these corporate structures for some of the larger companies, that's a lot of like the challenge for us is like, how do we contemplate everything and how do we format it in a way that's consolidated and easy to handle, right? Because, when you start to like, I'll give an example, like probably the craziest was we were working with a company that went public via an RTO, and they had all of these different entities kind of pushed together. And I think they had between 40 to 50 different sets of insurance programs. So one is like, how do you manage all of those renewals? It's like impossible, right? If somebody handles that component. And two, it's how do we take all of that exposure and try to consolidate it? Because now we have a parent organization, and how do we consolidate it and streamline it? And so what we did was we took it from 45 to 5 policies. Because the way that insurance works is if you structure it from the top down, you can cover any wholly owned or majority owned subsidiary. But the information gathering, the work to do that. Like that's why we always say to people as they're continuing to grow as an organization to try to streamline and consolidate like early and often. Because what happens is companies or like organizations grow and they grow through M&A activity and they just keep adding policies and policies. And then it gets to a point where it's overwhelming. And then you're also not capturing like economies of scale with your insurance, right? So I would say that was one of the
I'm sure you
the
saved them
craziest
a lot
one.
of money from 40 to 5.
Yeah, well, because you have like if you have 40 policies that are each rated off of, let's say, like $1 million in revenue versus one policy that's rated off of $40 million in revenue, that one policy is going to be more expensive, but your actual rate is going to be much better, right? For that one specific policy versus your rate per $1,000 of revenue is going to be much higher if you just split it out $1 million per entity. So that's one of the advantages of consolidating. That was one of the challenges.
People realize how complex cannabis is, right? People
Yeah.
think that they're gonna get into cannabis and it's a green rush and we're gonna make millions and millions of dollars, and there's so much compliance and regulation
Totally.
and just hoops that you have to jump through, right? It's not easy to get capital, it's not easy to get insurance, it's not easy to get a bank account, right? You have so many hoops to jump through. Me personally, I've never experienced until I became a cannabis operator.
Yeah.
And then I had to go out and look for insurance and do all this stuff, and it's crazy the amount of work that goes into it behind it. And then, it just sucks because it's still, you always get hit with that cannabis tax no matter what. No matter if you're getting capital, no matter if you're getting insurance, no matter
Right.
if you're getting a bank account. Like my bank account is the craziest thing ever, how
Yeah.
much money we pay just to hold money in their account, it's absurd, so to me, yes, cannabis is a great industry. There's a lot of upside, but there's still so many issues that need to be handled. Especially for startups, right? Like there's so many challenges for a startup. Like
Yeah.
how, well, I'm sure there's a lot of differences that you see, but like what are some challenges that you see from like startup operators like here in New York and New Jersey and
Well, New York having gone
Yeah.
through all the struggles that the growing pains, shall we say,
Yeah.
New York has been going through. What's your take on that as well? Being here in New York and seeing all this.
It's tough. I mean, it's challenging because it seems like you like it's hard to get excited because like I feel like every time people get excited about it, it's just like something comes out of the
I'm
woodwork.
excited,
And
man.
I'm
Listen,
I'm very I'm,
I
I'm,
am too.
I'm from Long Island. I'm fired up. Don't get me wrong.
It's in our backyard, how could you not be excited?
Absolutely. And I think there's obviously a lot of challenges and issues with the rollout. I I think every market has its challenges, right? I think there's always going to be I can't speak. I'm not going to speak directly as to the nuances and specifics of the challenges because I'm not an operator. And I really feel for those that are investing a lot of time and resources, right?
Yeah, but from your end, I'm
Yeah,
sure so many operators that are interested in insurance and
yeah,
have their property or don't or leasing a property or not leasing a property yet, but like, you know, they kind of think a lot of people think that like insurance should be the last thing that they do. But meanwhile, you need it to build, you need it once
yeah.
you lease your property. It's one of the first things that you do once you start committing to starting your business, right?
Yeah, a lot of it is like contractual requirement driven, right? Like whenever you sign a lease, there's going to be some sort of language that says you need to maintain XYZ amount of commercial general liability and name the landlord as an additional insured, right? And so that's where a lot of people really see the first, like, okay, I need to
First
like
step, they
actually
take that
handle
first.
this. But I mean, we've had so many conversations with operators and like even those that were going through the licensing process. Like we started having conversations even before that they were submitting, even before they actually had real estate located, because part of their application, we were giving like what's called like letter of intent, basically saying if and when you're awarded a valid license by the state of New York, we'll be able to get you the insurance that you need, right? So we were doing that, for the past 2 years, really. And now, it's starting to come to fruition, but still, we're still having those preliminary conversations with folks. But it's definitely starting to mature. People are getting leases. People, are starting to do construction. So we're definitely doing a lot more work. I think the next 2 years is going to be pretty, pretty hot, right? I think a lot more. I mean, a lot more is a relative term. We have
I
how many
think
dispensaries in New York City right now? So like,
it's
it's gonna, yeah,
but one thing that surprised me, starting a dispensary ourselves is that we have to get builder's risk insurance
yeah,
ourselves, as the operator. I always thought that the builder was responsible for that.
yeah. I mean, it really depends on the situation. A lot of times, contractors will be the one to maintain it. It really just depends on the contractual requirements of leases, honestly. And like, I've seen so many different variations. Some require upwards of $10 million in limits. Some are just like simple 1 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate. It really, unfortunately, depends on the landlord. And unfortunately, too, like a lot of times, I was reading a contract today for an operator. It was like the insurance, you have to have 2 million per occurrence. You have to have a $3 million umbrella on top of that, and it has to be an admitted carrier in the state of New York, right? Well, unfortunately, admitted insurance companies don't write in the cannabis space, right? And so, like, we have to educate that landlord or the attorney that's behind that lease contract and say, hey, listen, like, I know you're putting this forward. We're going to get them credible insurance. Like, all the carriers that we work with are A minus rated and above, like AM best, like very quality. Like, it's not,
the bad weed carrot.
no, it's not at all, right? And what's awesome too is that more and more are starting to jump into the space, honestly. But and the one thing too is like, you talked about the cannabis tax. Like from our perspective, it's not even that the framework of the cannabis industry, it's more like with us, it's still only been around since like legal framework since 2012. It's a really new space. Yeah, and also like insurance companies the most risk averse people, right? And also too, it's a very new emerging space. Like I have that kind of insight because of where I was previously at Founder Shield. Like when I was working with a company that was doing an Airbnb model, there was even less carriers writing that, right? Because of the risk associated with it. And it's like
Sure.
a newer industry, and insurance companies are just very risk averse and jumping into something. We used to do micromobility companies. There's only one insurance company that would write any of those micromobility. So, but a lot of it is like it's high risk, but it's also just like a new industry. There's not a lot of underwriting data behind it. There's not a lot of loss history. So like, but it's getting much better every single year. It's like it's night and day from where it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do insurance carriers in the cannabis industry, have you seen payouts? Like, do they pay out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big part of it too is that and is education with our client. Like, so I'll give you kind of two examples. So a big thing with property coverage and like at retail locations is like, okay, we're going to give you property coverage for theft or fire, but how are you actually storing the product at night? Right. Like one situation, the client has a approved safe, everything guidelines by the policy. And like a lot of these policies will have a section in it. It's called like protective safeguards. So essentially it's like, we will give you theft coverage, but you need to be in compliance with A, B, C, D. It's like about like security cameras, alarm systems, the type of safe that you're locking in. Like, do you lock all your product away at night? So on and so forth. So we had one client though that was just leaving the product out overnight
In the showcase.
in the showcase, like basically like it's avocados at the Whole Foods. You know what I
Right.
mean? And like you're asking for it a little bit, right?
Right,
And so like they unfortunately had, an issue, and that claim was denied because they weren't adhering to the guidelines of the policy. But we've had many other instances where, you know, manufacturing facility and there's a big windstorm, right, that comes through. So what I say to that is like, it's just very important to understand and be educated, like what is and what's not covered, and make sure that you have a broker and a partner that understands the cannabis industry, understands the nuances of the policies and how they work.
Yep.
Because I mean,
Same thing in lending.
yeah,
Very similar.
it's I think that's the bigger part of it is like educate. We always like just pride ourselves as like education, transparency. Like if something's not covered, like we're gonna let you know, right? And so because insurance at the end of the day is like one part of risk management,
Right.
right? It's like what other things are you doing to prevent losses to the business? You shouldn't just say, well, I have an insurance policy, I'm good and I can do whatever I want, right? Because
Right.
so and that's how we always phrase it, because there's other ways to mitigate risk than just having insurance.
Yeah.
That's what that I would be. I'd be like, I have insurance, whatever.
On me, Jim.
We just make sure that you know what's
Yeah.
is and what's not covered. So
Yeah.
I think it's just education, transparency, and just letting clients know.
What's happening in California right
Yeah.
now? In California, on Instagram, I literally see dispensaries getting robbed left and
The
right.
dispensary I was talking about was located in Oakland. This was like years ago. Yeah, it's really
They're just getting right now in LA. It's a free for all. They're literally driving cars through the dispensary doors and raiding these places.
Yeah.
And the cops are doing nothing about it. So
There was just an officer that just got killed, and
crazy.
Really?
Yeah, it's like mayhem.
yeah, it was really sad.
But yeah, really, New York's got to clean their act up as well.
Well, once we get rid of some of the illegal smoke shops, you don't insure them. I think.
No, that's the thing is like you have to show like you have a valid license, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that's what I was saying too earlier is like honestly a lot of the cannabis businesses, their risk management and their like the SOPs that are in place, it's top tier, right? Like you always talk, we always say like an outsider view on the cannabis industry, like people don't understand the nuance. Yeah, it's such bullshit. And
it's literally the most compliant, strict business here.
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
packaging for brands, the different state to state, like all of those things, I think from us, like For sure. Do we run into certain characters that are, not doing things the right way and we can't work with them? Absolutely. But that's going to be with any business. But for the most part, our clients are, yeah, well, because you're giving out money. People aren't just going to like buy insurance.
Phone call in California. He's on the phone with the lender. It's us and the mortgage lender on the phone, and they're like, "All right, tell us about your tenants. Like, can you get us financials on your tenants?" He's like, "No, I can't get financials on them." He's like, "Well, how many tenants?" He's like, "9." Big cultivation facility. He's like, "I think about 6 of them are doing illegal stuff." He's like, "I can't prove it, but I think they're all sliding stuff out from under the table." And I'm like,
Why would you say
ever
that?
tell this to a
Yeah.
but like, just that
Yeah.
guy's probably using this all.
Did you write him a check?
No.
But to your
Yeah.
point, I don't think people realize how important it is when I talk to people about when I was at this party about insurance. Literally the idea was like that, they were also selling insurance like in Washington Square Park. Like,
Yeah.
you need a policy.
No.
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 So people don't. I mean, people need much more education about what's going on in the industry as a whole.
And there's a lot more, like what we do at AlphaRoot. I like to think that we're pretty good at what we do and the product that we deliver and the service that we deliver. But like, there's a lot of other brokerages, getting into the space, right? And because people see the opportunity, they see that there's a gap, and I think that's great, right? I think that there's a lot. It's all needed, right? I don't think it's like overly saturated yet. I think it will be eventually, but hopefully by that time, the folks that have been investing into the space early, right? Not just coming in kind of at the tail end, will have that brand equity that will allow us to succeed. But no, I mean, we were required to build the cannabis business of BRP, right? Like because they were an old traditional and like brokerage that has a lot of business in like commercial real estate, life science, and they saw that there was a gap in expertise in this space and saw it as an emerging market and wanted to get into it, but they didn't have the expertise in house, right, to build it out. And so no, it's been a great partnership, and I think like again that just shows the continued investment into the cannabis industry, not just operators, not it's ancillary businesses. It's pretty cool to see. I'm a big, because I know there can be a lot of like negative sentiment, but I always try to like keep in mind, not this, I love it, but like, I try to keep in mind, like if you were to look at this time last year where we are, maybe not having as many, we'd all like to have more dispensaries in New York. I think we agree upon that, but just like the industry as a whole, right? Like Ohio just got recreationally legal. Like every year there's positive momentum in the space. And I just think, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
So,
let's talk about the future. Where do you see cannabis in New York in the next couple years and nationwide? Where do you see it?
I'm super excited because New York City retail is the mecca of retail, right? And you go to Fifth Avenue, you go to Soho, every single major brand in the world has some sort of retail presence in New York, right? So I'm super excited to see how people like transform retail and make it like a really cool experience. And I think also that will continue to shift the stigma of cannabis, because right now the stigma is like the smoke shops and people are like, well, it's legalized and now we have all that. But like,
Difference between
no,
They don't.
That's the biggest problem.
Yeah.
But how should they?
They don't know.
They don't.
Right?
They have no idea.
So until they fix that or until more shops open, they'll start to realize, and
Yeah.
it'll change so drastically in New York, especially. Like for me, it's New York. It's New York City, like the tourism capital of the world. Like you're not just going to be coming to New York to go to a dispensary to smoke weed. You're going to be going to restaurants that are going to be able to sit down and have.
That's what I was going to say. I think they're
illegal, but
there'll be theater experiences.
I think beverages,
beverages,
being able to go to a bar and just, I truly think that it's And I mean, you're talking about too, like, generations that are moving away from alcohol and trying to be on the
Yeah.
more health conscious side, right? You see even restaurants coming up with more alternative non-alcoholic beverages. And I think just like cannabis is in a really good position to, I think that's where New York City could be an unbelievable market, bigger than any other is like specifically on the beverage side, if like bars and
And for
restaurants
me,
could.
like best brands were always built out of New York, like
Yep.
Supreme, Kids,
Yeah.
all the really cool brands, like there's gonna be some really good brands that come out of New York that end up going into all the other cannabis legal
Totally.
states, because New York is just great at storytelling.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll see like a Broadway show where you get the whole audience gets high before
I
the
hope
show,
You
and
are
then there's a
starring in that
crazy
Broadway
musical.
show,
Yeah.
and we get
I hope
you
you're on stage giving
Yeah.
stand-up comedy.
Yeah, that would be great.
We
That'd
get
be
him
awesome.
high before. That's one of my
Yeah.
my goals is to just get James high and just put the camera in front of him because he does not smoke weed at all. And
I mean,
then-
I do gummies, but I mean, I have an 8-year-old and I'm home and, he's like, it's so interesting because he's 8 years old and he sees so much cannabis and we talked about cannabis and he's literally like, oh, cannabis.
Good.
Like, yeah.
Good
you know.
one. All right, we have one question.
Sure.
We ask every single guest.
I usually ask it, but you go.
I
ahead.
stole. This
I thought
question.
I love this question, by the way.
So, if you had a weed strain named after you, what would that weed strain be? Any weed strain. Give me an answer.
Like how crazy do people like kind of get? It's like all right. So like the first thing that popped into my head was like I played sports. I played lacrosse growing up, Long
me
Island,
too.
and all throughout college, and I played goalie, and so like my friends always like called me like a spider monkey. So
Yes.
when I looked at this, I was like, and I'm kind of like, well, not a huge personality, but I'm a big like I get excited and big enthusiastic guy. So I thought like electric spider monkey would be,
I like
would be my my
electric
straight
spider. Yeah,
electric
I
spider
like
monkey.
that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It sounds weird. I agree. So
Sounds like also an alternative band from the 90s.
yeah,
Electric
yeah,
Spider
that keeps you up. I don't know.
Definitely.
Also, like spider monkeys are just like a lot full of energy, and
That's one of the best names we've had. I think must
I get it.
Ralph.
Yeah.
Hey, Ralphie, what would be your strain, Ralphie?
It's called the Mott's.
The Mott's. Love that.
All right, man. Well, we appreciate you coming on. Appreciate
Yeah.
all your time.
Yeah.
Appreciate the partnership with AlphaRoot. And
We'd love to have you come back
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me, and like we're just here to be a resource for the community and help educate and provide the service what we do, and I think that's kind of like how we give back to the industry, and
Yeah.
so
we appreciate all you do. We come to all your parties. You guys have some cool parties too.
I know.
You guys see them around. Come to their industry parties.
And come to our Broadway show. That's going to happen.
All right, thanks, man.
Thank you.
Cut.